are looking at how to pronounce this word, as well as how to say more Native American names in English. How do you go about pronouncing it? Soto. Pretty straightforward once you know Soto. And now you know. Here are more videos on how to pronounce more names of Native American peoples, whose pronunciations aren't exactly always obvious. I'll see you there.
Sato, Stony, Nakota, Dakota, and Cree, as well as the traditional. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining our call. It's 11:27, so we'll get started in about 3-ish minutes. Can see everyone joining. I'll turn my video on here in a second. Good to see everyone. Hello. I hope everyone is doing well. We had about 30 people register, so we'll see who all shows up. Should be a good session for sure. If you're just joining the call, welcome. It's already May 27th. Nuts. But I hope everyone has been enjoying the sun. Long weekend was last week, I think. So hopefully you were able to relax a little bit. I know some of you were. We'll get started in about a minute here. Hi, Mo. Hello, Mo.
Hi, how are you?
I'm well. How are you? It's good to see you.
Good, thanks. Yeah, you too.
Your audio and video is working good?
Yeah, everything worked. Everything came on right away.
Okay. So we'll get started in about a minute. We're still waiting for a few attendees here.
Yeah, no worries. I wanted to ask you again. I couldn't remember. How do you pronounce your name?
Chinooka.
Chinooka? Okay.
Chinooka, yeah.
Okay, perfect. I actually am hoping to be traveling into Saskatchewan soon. Still not yet. Manitoba and Saskatchewan is my territory, right? I usually travel probably monthly to Saskatchewan under normal conditions, but I've only been there once since last March, right? Just because of COVID. So hoping to get there soon, but Manitoba's not doing real well, unfortunately.
No, yeah. Don't want to risk it, but I'll be here when you do. So
yeah, perfect. Yeah, I usually try and stop by and see Brev anyway. And I've known Dan for a long time. I don't usually see him when I stop in, but I mean, I work with a couple of plants that are working in your facility right now too. Drake Meats, I supply, and SJ So I do get to your facility quite often, actually.
That's awesome. All right, we're going to get started. We're still waiting for, oh, there's Angela. We're still waiting for a number of attendees, but as everyone knows, people will come join the call a little bit late, so that's okay. But it is 11:30, so I'm going to get started. And nice to see you, Angela. Welcome.
Hi.
Your audio and video is working good?
I think so. Do I sound okay?
Yeah, you sound perfect.
Great.
All right, well, we're going to get started. We have 15, 16 people on the call right now. And we have, of course, our 3 featured speakers. So let's get started here. Today, we are talking about packaging. And it is a huge topic. So I'm excited to have our 3 speakers here at Awesome Leaders. First, I want to do a treaty acknowledgement because Awesome is, of course, a Canada-wide program, and it is important for us to do that treaty acknowledgement. So I want to acknowledge that we are gathering on treaty land. The treaties serve to govern our relationship with Indigenous people, their ancestors, and the community. I'm connecting with you today on Treaty 6 territory, which is traditionally the territory of the Saulteaux, the Stoney, the Nakota, Dakota, and Cree, as well as the traditional land of the homeland of the Métis, and we acknowledge their contributions. So if you are new to Awesome, we are a program that supports women across Manitoba, Saskatchewan, and Alberta who own agri-value companies. I am at the Saskatchewan Food Industry Development Center. We are at heart, we're a processing facility, but of course we offer this program for women in agriculture and agribusiness. So Awesome Leaders Mentor Circle is one of our services, and it's designed for women who have established businesses. So meaning that you have product on the shelf and that you're selling. And it's meant to explore topics influencing your business success, so relevant topics. And packaging is most certainly one of those things. And then of course, Awesome Leaders at the end, after the panelists speak, there'll be an opportunity for us to participate in a focused discussion. And thank you everyone for sending in all of those questions. They were great. So the intent is for you to learn from entrepreneurs and experts in our community here. Okay, so as always, I'll do a quick preface to get us started and to set the tone. And then we have our 3 speakers, Maurice, Angela, and Adityan. And then we'll do an open floor Q&A to conclude. Okay. Oh, and also, I knew I put that note. I knew I was going to forget. You'll see there that we have our Awesome conference next month. So there's not going to be an Awesome Leaders session. There will be the conference, which is essentially Awesome Leaders just doubled. So we have a panelist of experts, professionals, and then we'll also do the entrepreneur panel. This, if you were at the last conference, it was in November, at the end of November. And the theme was financing pathways. So it'll be very similar to that, maybe a couple more, like 1 or 2 surprises. And the theme will be marketing, food marketing, lessons in food marketing, which is again, a huge topic. But the speakers, we've been chatting with them, and I think they'll be able to bring some really unique insights to that topic because it is so big. So just most of you are on the mailing list. We'll put information on the website as we have it, and it'll be over Zoom. So yeah, June 23rd. Okay. So I've asked the speakers today to talk about areas that they have explored in their journey in packaging. Maurice is actually not, as you probably gathered, he isn't a food processor, which is completely fine, but he works for Wimpac, which is a really important connection. Many of the questions that were submitted had to do with just being connected into the packaging sector, like into that supply. And so personally, I think Maurice and Wimpac will be a great place for you to explore, learn, and start. And Wimpac may not be able to give you support like tomorrow, but of course, it's all about relationship building and gathering that knowledge and pacing yourself. So that's why we have that representation today. Okay, so to get us started, and just again, like to set the tone, you'll see a little quote there: solving packaging processes in food can be as complex as your product's formulation, which is so true. So you can have the most delicious tasting, most functionally sound product, but if the packaging isn't persuasive and informative, you're probably going to lose the sale. So just as much as I see all of you pay attention to your product and the recipe and the look and taste and textures of your product, that same diligence and that same care should be applied to the packaging. So you'll see here, I've been saying that it's a huge topic, but we've narrowed it down into 5 areas that regardless of what what phase of business you're in, you can just use this as an audit. Every time you grow, every time you increase your production run, you might have to change some of this stuff, okay? So, and definitely the speakers today will probably elaborate on some of these things, but general considerations, shape and size, material and material layers, labeling, brand alignment, and shipping efficiency and distribution points. So shape and size, self-explanatory, right? So, and it could be things like, is it a square? Is it a rectangle? Is it portion controlled, right? Is it small units? Is it bulk packaging? Like the basic, what is the shape and size? And usually as an entrepreneur, you'll probably have like some kind of vision regarding the shape and size. The second point, material and material layers is rather important, right? And the speakers will talk about that today. Of course, we are in our modern business models, we're considering the environmental impact that all of the material layers have. And when I say material layers, I mean that typically you have 3 layers to your packaging. You'll have the actual product packaging, which protects the actual food product. And then you'll probably have another layer outside of that that may serve as like romance or some kind of branding. Or if you're shipping to, let's say like Sobeys or something, the second layer might be something like a film wrap. So there's usually like a second permeation there. And then there's the outer layer. So if you have to put it in a cardboard box, or if you're shipping a frozen product, like there's a whole outer layer process that comes with frozen products. So typically, you can think of this packaging journey in 3 layers. And each layer has an opportunity to be informative, and each layer has an opportunity to be persuasive. Okay, labeling, number 3. Huge topic as well. Usually when we think of packaging, our next thought is labeling. So this conversation today, you're probably not going to get to, I don't know, like I asked the speakers to talk more about the expansive topic of packaging, like the design and more of the marketing side. When it comes to informative labeling, CFIA is your expert, and that is where you have to develop the relationship. I will put I think the next slide, I have 2 links that I'll share, one of them being CFIA, the food labeling tool. I'm not sure if all of you have heard of it, but it's just like an interactive tool that you can see like different product categories and different sizes of your actual product. And it's a really great tool to work with. So finding a labeling expert, like if I was you, I would just start developing that relationship with CFIA. And you can think of your labeling, like I've been saying like romance, and I've been saying informative or data. And the 2 other ways in your labeling, the 2 other philosophies here are the texts and then the graphics. So your text elements, you have things that are like the nutrition facts, like you need that on there, but then you also have like your slogan or something that's like aligns with the brand, right? And then you also have your graphic elements, which are symbolism, which the marketing is very heavily based off of symbols, right? So it is important that you have colors, pictures, and also information symbols, like if there's dry ice or if there's, if it's alcohol, like this kind of stuff. Okay. Number 4, brand alignment. I've alluded to that a couple times here. So there's 2 things. There's your pre and post sale experience that needs to align with your packaging, and then your pre and post consumption experience. So those are 2 different things. When the customer actually buys the product, there's a packaging element that they can be persuaded by or informed by. And then when they consume, there's usually a moment where they go back to the packaging, right? Like they eat it, and as they're eating it or after they've eaten it, they might look at it again. And this is important because usually a person that's doing this is someone who is new to your product, who's trying to adopt your product into their life. And I bring this up because so often we see companies who have really tight social media strategy or really great presence outside of the actual product. And then when the customer actually experiences the product, it is not aligned with the everything outside of that, like the social media, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, like whatever influencer was saying, whatever they were saying online, it's not aligned. So that needs to be there too. If purple is an important color in your social media, then that can translate into the packaging. Okay, so there's the sale and the consumption when you think of your brand. And that last point here, and then I'm going to toss it over to our first speaker, is shipping efficiencies and distribution points. So things like temperature, I know, very difficult. But there are people do it, right? Like I know that there are lots of complex challenges and puzzle pieces when it comes to shipping. But companies can do it. It's just about finding the right people in the value chain who can help you. So shipping is one thing, and then the actual distribution point, like the point of sale, is another thing. So what does the packaging look like actually on the shelf, right? What does it actually look like when I'm trying to sell it online on the website? Okay, so, and there's tons of information from just like online mentors and different articles that you can find on packaging. But let me show you, the last thing I'll show you is this link. I'll put it in the chat when oh shoot, I didn't add the links. I'll put the links in the chat when I'm done here. But it is the CFIA tool. And then FedEx has, we're not sponsored by FedEx. They don't know who I am, but that has been the best guide that I found in terms of how to ship frozen, how to ship perishable, long distance, like within the domestic market. So not overseas. So I'll put those links in the chat, but a lot of it comes down, like I said, to CFIA with just developing the relationship. Lots of the questions that all of you have probably would be answered with CFIA, and when we do the Q&A, I'll make sure that those questions get answered somehow today or after. Okay, so I'm going to stop. I really love this topic. Like I'm not a food process. Like I don't know any, like I'm not a recipe person. Like not very good with ingredient innovation, but packaging is a really exciting topic to me. Like I said, like you can it's so fickle in the sense that you can have a really great product, you have the best tasting product, and if it's not in the right packaging, the consumer just it's not there for you. So I really love how influential this topic can be for food CPG. Okay, so let's get started. Maurice, are you ready?
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah, thank you very much. Excuse me. Thank you for reaching out to me. I don't often do presentations like this. I usually work with customers directly one-on-one. So yeah, so I wanted to say I definitely will be around for the Q&A part after. And if anyone wanted to reach out to me directly after, feel free to give out my contact information, or they can reach out to WinPack directly and reach me that way. So yeah, so what I thought I'd start with, I don't think WinPack would answer a lot of the questions that you were discussing regarding marketing but we would definitely be a good fit for a lot of applications for that first primary contact, and then even sometimes the secondary contact. So what I thought I'd do, I'll explain a little bit about WinPack first, and then I'll explain some of the things that we like to discuss when starting a new opportunity. So yeah, WinPack started a little over 40 years ago in Winnipeg, Manitoba, actually. Winnipeg is our biggest business unit right now. We have a little over 800 staff there producing various flexible and semi-rigid products for different types of packaging applications, primarily thermal forming. So for anyone who doesn't know what thermal forming is, it's essentially a piece of equipment that takes a formable web of film and creates a pocket you fill your product into that pocket, and then the second non-forming web of film gets sealed to that, and that gives you your package. So if you've ever bought a package of bacon, for instance, or a sliced bologna or things, commonly that would be a thermoformed package. You can use clear film, you can print it. I mean, there's you can add a zipper. There's a lot of different options to that. I would say that probably the biggest consideration there, the investment, would be the equipment. The film is fairly straightforward and it's easy, but the film is dictated by what the equipment can do. So we always have to understand that side of things before we can proceed with an application like that. Another piece we would do there in Winnipeg here is the vertical film. So for instance, if you've ever bought a pouch of shredded cheese, for instance, that's normally a single web of film that's creating a pouch in line as it's being packaged. So that type of pouch is something we do. And then of course the stand-up pouches and the 3-side seal pouches, vacuum pouches, with the various options and print designs or whatever. That's primarily what we do here in Winnipeg. We also have our facility in California that produces what are called lane equipment. So that's for liquid fill applications, things like ketchup packages, things like yogurt Yoplait tubes, or even food service large soup pouches. Those are done there. And then of course, Winnipeg complements that by being able to supply the film for those machines. We have a division in Atlanta that produces shrink bags, very similar to a vacuum pouch, but it's usually dipped in water or some kind of a hot shower that causes the material to shrink and tighten around the product. And it can be quite, aesthetically pleasing, actually. It really makes the product, it takes the shape of the product quite nicely. And again, there's printing options there. And then we have our plants in Chicago that do the rigid containers. So for instance, things like meat trays that kind of emulate the old styrofoam trays. Things like the little dippers that if you order takeout pizza and you get the little dipping sauce, we manufacture those as well. I think our biggest customer for that facility to date is still Keurig. We do the K-cups, the little pods for coffee and for creamers and things like that. So that gives you a little bit of an overview of what WinPak offers. I work only in the Manitoba and Saskatchewan territories, so I am a little bit limited in my experience with those different divisions to what my customers require. And I don't have a lot of customers buying the rigid containers right now, and I don't have anyone who's ever bought a piece of lane equipment. You have to be doing some pretty good volume to be able to make stuff like that work. So, but the option is there, and I'm always happy to discuss that. So anytime there's a new product or new project or new opportunity to discuss, I always like to ask a lot of questions. Sometimes my customers tell me I ask too many questions. It's part of the business. The more we understand, the better we can help. And sometimes we can't help with immediately what the customer wants, but the more I understand, I can potentially offer alternatives to properly support a new opportunity. So, we consider things like shelf life, for instance. What kind of shelf life? What that dictates the barrier that your pouch needs, right? Are you considering is an oxygen the concern? Is it light? Is it moisture? Maybe there is no shelf life to consider. Perhaps you're packaging something like an Epsom salt or something. I do have customers that do pet foods, do things like that shelf life is not a consideration for them. So, that just helps us kind of direct you to what type of film you would need, what best suits your application. Obviously, the visual look, as Shanuga mentioned, the visual look makes a big difference on what we can offer. Are you considering, do you want something like a haptic, for instance? A couple of years ago, we developed haptic printing. It's a really cool technology. We can actually add texture to the plastic pouches. So for instance, I had a customer actually based in Saskatchewan who used to wrap his meat historically in meat wrap, right, in resinite with the brown paper wrap over top. And he got a thermoformer. He wanted to kind of keep some of that old world look in his new packaging. So he created a beautiful design that included a portion of the label that looks and feels still like paper, just to kind of keep that look in his package. So there's some really neat things you can do with design. And obviously I did want to point out the limitation with color. So a lot of times when I'm working with a new customer, especially with a smaller customer who maybe doesn't have a lot to invest in the design, you want to consider the number of colors. Each color requires a plate for printing. So, and that plate has a cost, and it could be anywhere from $400 to $500, $600 per plate per color, and that's per design usually. So that's a consideration where you may have this beautiful 10-color design that, 10 colors ultimately on a pouch or a printed film doesn't impact the price of that film a whole lot, but the upfront cost regarding the plates may be a little bit more challenging to deal with, right? You could be looking at $3,000 or $4,000 for plate costs. The nice thing about that is those plate costs, it's a one-time thing, and if you never change your design, you never have to pay that again. You can print for 100 years and never have to pay that again. But again, it's something that you want to consider when you're first starting out a project, right? Then there's the performance. What is your packaging doing? Is it being handled a lot? Is it do you need something that can handle abuse? Is your product itself maybe abrasive? Is there temperature considerations? Are you filling the product hot? Even features like zipper, for instance. Do you need a zipper? Do you need a tear notch, laser score, hole punch? All of these kind of things kind of factor into the early preliminary discussions so that we ensure we're able to offer you what you need, right? Capabilities, of course, is one of the biggest concerns, and that alludes to, as I said earlier, the thermoforming equipment. For instance, if you wanted to go that route, there can be a substantial investment in, capital investment in that piece of equipment in order to do that. The great thing is with working with the Sask Food Centers, you can work with them and use that equipment without any big investment. And only have to consider the cost of the film then, right? So, but eventually your goal is to grow into that and you want to do it yourself. So we want to work with you on that, right? And then I guess expectations. What exactly do you want out of your package? Is it about, the difference between retail and food service, for instance? I have a lot of customers who just use food service. They don't care what the package looks like as long as it's functional. Sometimes maybe there is still a requirement for food service. For instance, a cheese processor I work with, they require a blue tinted film because they supply a lot of meat processors to make things like cheese smokies. And they need that packaging to be blue so that when it gets opened up and poured into the meat emulsion, if there's any potential for a piece of that to rip off and fall into the batter, then they spot it. That's why they require a blue tint, right? It's not natural in the meat, and it would be noticed. So there's a lot of different considerations to think about, and the more questions I ask, the better. I definitely want to know a lot in order to either offer you what you want, or if we're not able to, offer you the alternative. So that's kind of what WinPack does. We have a great technical services team that works with each sales rep on each opportunity to ensure that if it's shelf life, if it's aesthetics, if it's for whatever reason you want your packaging, you get it then, right? I would like to also point out that I know sustainability was brought up in Shanuka's first presentation. We are launching our sustainable recycle ready products as well. So what we're trying to get to is a point where it's just a drop-in replacement to an existing whether it's a pouch or thermoform or vertical inline pouch, we have a replacement that is sustainable. We claim it as recycle ready only because we know right now those flexible packaging is not treated the same as rigid containers. So right now, though you would like to put it in your blue box, you can, and unfortunately the reality is it's not going to be recycled yet. That side of the industry, the recovery side, has to kind of catch up and treat these flexible packages the same way they would a rigid container, but just right now they don't. But the real benefit and the claim you can make in your sustainability program right now is on the carbon emission side, the greenhouse gas, the life cycle. We found that there's a tremendous improvement in the reduction of greenhouse gases with these sustainable options versus the more standard products. And just to kind of give you a quick rundown on that, a lot of times the films we make, there are layers within that film that are a recyclable or sustainable product, but the problem is it's a multi-layer product that's bonded, and there's no way to separate that right now. So that's why we have to look at an alternative like the recycle ready products that we're developing that are more of a monolayer material, so that the material exceeds a certain value in order to be considered of the same kind of characteristic as a rigid container, right? So I think I've kind of covered everything I want to. As I said, I'm willing to stay. I'll stay on for the Q&A part. And if you have any questions, like I say, reach out to me directly anytime. I'm happy to answer any other questions. So.
Great. Thank you so much, Mo. That was so awesome. I really appreciate you joining us today and taking your time out. And I will definitely share your contact information if you're okay with that.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I'm a pretty easy guy to deal with. And like I say, like working on the prairies, it's the best people to work with, right? So anytime, yeah, I'm glad to help.
Awesome. Well, I'll let the attendees think about some questions that they want to ask you, and we'll come back to you when we start the Q&A.
Sure.
Next up is Angela Sato from Three Foragers Bee Co. And she has some really interesting things to say about compostable packaging and that area. So please welcome her to the stage. Take it away, Angela.
Thanks. I'm just going to share my screen if that's okay.
Yes, you should be able to.
It says it's disabled, unfortunately.
Try again.
Okay, thanks.
Perfect. Thanks.
Okay. So is my screen visible?
Yes, I can see it perfectly.
Okay, perfect. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for having me today. I'm really excited to talk about sustainability, flexible food packaging. I'm really glad that Maurice kind of touched upon it as well, and just kind of our experiences. So our primary mission at Three Foragers is to better the planet and people's lives through food. So when we started looking at packaging options for our products, we knew that our product as a whole had to be good for the environment from the inside out. Now, for any of us who have looked at sustainable packaging for our products, you'll know that you can kind of go down a rabbit hole of information that is pretty overwhelming and has a lot of gray areas. And unfortunately, because there's so many different types of foods out there that have all different types of requirements, there's no straightforward answer on what is the most sustainable material, because different products will have different requirements. So I will be sharing some of the experiences that I had while trying to find a sustainable, flexible packaging option for honey caramels, which you can see here. I will say I'm by no means an expert. I do not have the knowledge that somebody like Maurice would have for this type of material, but these are just kind of the findings that I came across while I was looking for something for our products. So going into this project, my aim was to find packaging that was plastic free and compostable. So over the past few years, there's been a lot of improvements and innovations in compostable takeout food packaging, which you see a lot in restaurants and cafes now, which is great. But the options available for CPGs like us were a bit more limited, and still actually are quite limited, because the technology, like Maurice mentioned, is still being developed. There's like a lot of factors that have to be tested and looked at, and there haven't been a lot of major adoptions either from the really big, big fast moving CPG brands that are out there. So I started looking at what options were available in terms of degradable packaging, and there are a few major categories of sustainable bioplastics, which is what they're called, that are available on the market. So there's biodegradable, compostable, and oxo-degradable. I did not look at recycling for this option, although I do firmly believe that recyclable packaging, like Maurice mentioned, is a really great alternative as well. But we were just hoping to look for something that was actually compostable. So these three terms I put on the screen often are used quite a bit. They are not interchangeable, and they are not equivalent in terms of sustainability. I won't go too deep into the definitions, but in general terms, biodegradable materials are those that can break down over time into biomass, but they can either be biologically based or petroleum based. And there's no specification on how much time it will take to degrade, but generally it's faster than plastic. Within that circle, you can see we have compostable materials, which are a subset that are biological based and will break down in a standard time frame and conditions. And then within that, you can have certified compostable materials that are tested to disintegrate within 12 weeks and will biodegrade at least 90% within 180 days. So that's about half a year, give or take, in a municipal or industrial composting facility. And the leftover compost that results from that material needs to be certified to be free of toxins. So there's a very, very specific criteria when you start to break down into deeper and deeper levels of these sustainable plastics. A good rule of thumb to understand the difference between compostable and biodegradable is that when you think about composting, you're thinking about like providing nutrients and fertilizer to the earth. So what you have should be nourishing or should be providing actual material for the earth. Whereas biodegradable as a term just means breaking things down to innocuous elements. So it's the material is designed just to break down and not necessarily to be beneficial for soil or the earth. You can see I also have oxo-degradable here, which is outside of the circles. This is a material that is actually an entirely different category, but also often comes up when you look at sustainable packaging. They've been kind of under hot water recently because oxo-degradable materials are actually just conventional plastic that is mixed with an additive in order to imitate biodegradation. So this is a material that breaks down into smaller and smaller pieces, which are called microplastics. And microplastics is a term that's actually being heard a lot in the news because of the way that it's contaminating our environment. And so what's actually coming from oxo-degradable materials are left behind in the environment indefinitely. And so these materials are actually seen to be a lot more harmful than beneficial, and are starting to become banned in like other markets like the European Union, where they won't let materials made from oxo-degradable plastics into food products. So that's just an overview of what type of sustainable, like degradable materials are out there. And so as I was looking for sustainable packaging for ourselves, the criteria that I was looking for is it compostable? And when you're looking at if it's compostable, you don't just look at the film or material, you also need to look at the inks to see if they're non-toxic and are suitable for composting. You also want to look at all the components too. So the zippers, these can or can't be compostable. If you have a product that requires a valve, you want to see if those parts are compostable or not. And there is a variety of products out there that will have a spectrum of whether this is 100% compostable, or you might have some parts that are compostable, but other parts that are not. So those are things to look for if you're interested in compostable. The second thing is it protective? So, you know, it's nice to have compostable, but if your product shelf life suffers, then that that kind of rules it out, because you want to make sure that you have a product that will last long. So many compostable products that are currently on the market have inferior barrier properties, just because of the materials that they're using. They're just not as strong as plastic. Plastic is really popular because it does a really good job at keeping a barrier around your products. So for us, our honey caramels are quite hygroscopic, which means it likes to absorb moisture from the air very easily. So we had to really focus on trying to find a product that would have a really high barrier rate. And so if you have something that's similar, you'd be wanting to talk to the manufacturer and look at what their oxygen transfer rates would be and their water vapor transfer rates, because that looks at oxygen going in and out of the bag, which can degrade your product and cause oxidation, or water vapor. So it's like the moisture going in and out of the bag. And unfortunately, there's no bag out there that is like has like a 0% rate. But there are some that actually have really, really low rates that can be comparable to conventional plastic, but there's not a lot of availability out there. The other thing we looked at is affordability. You know, we are not a big brand. We are not, you know, multi-billion-dollar, million-dollar companies. So we want to make sure that we can afford to have these products. And we discovered that, you know, compostable packaging is really expensive. You know, it's not as widespread and as conventional packaging, so the supply is very limited. And so we found that it can be anywhere between 2.5 to 4 times greater than the cost of conventional packaging. For example, the lowest prices I've seen for higher volumes are 60 cents a unit, when you might have a conventional pouch that might be 20 cents a unit or less, right? And even at lower volumes, you can look at upwards of $1 a unit. So that's really expensive, and it could be really hard to swallow, especially if you have a lower cost item. However, you know, there are several brands out there that have higher cost products that are able to absorb these. And so that's something that can be considered if you have a more premium or higher quality, higher marketed brand with a higher price point, then you can sort of incorporate these costs into your package. And the final thing is, like, does it look good? And we found that with the compostable packaging, the resolution of printing is just as excellent as conventional packaging. But, you know, the material that they're using, it is different. So it could be brittle. It is a lot more brittle. It can wrinkle a bit when you have your package. But, you know, this can also be part of the charm of having something that's compostable. So there are ways to kind of like market this so that it is actually a good thing and not a bad thing. I also kind of want to touch, so this is what we ended up with. We were able to find a flexible packaging option that was made from wood cellulose and cornstarch. We were really happy with it. So that's the outer pouch. And then we also used certified compostable cellophane wrappers for wrapping the caramels themselves. So we have both first, primary and secondary elements were compostable options that we were able to find. So I just want to briefly touch on just regulation and certification of sustainable materials as well. Like, this is a quite new thing for food brands and actually all sorts of products out there. So there are regulations on environmental claims of compostability and degradability. and how you present your claims in your packaging. So the Competition Bureau Canada has these guidelines and they oversee the regulation. So you make sure that they make sure that customers are not misled and being told that a product is something when it really isn't. Certifying your product as compostable can also add more credibility for your brand and ease of mind for the consumer. So in North America, the only agency for compostable certification is the Biodegradable Products Institute. However, this can be very costly, like certification for any other product. It adds up in costs, even if the manufacturers that you purchase from who are making your product may be certified. You have to certify your product individually because they need to test that the exact application and your exact product falls within those standards that I said, the 12 weeks and 180 days in terms of the degradation. So in Canada, this is, you don't need certification yet, but I do foresee that eventually it'll probably happen. But in the US right now, you can't say your product is compostable unless it has certification. So you can still, that doesn't mean that the products out there aren't compostable, but they just can't use that type of language if they're marketing their products. So you'd have to look at other language when you start talking about your products. And I know that can be a barrier for smaller brands. Like for us, we're not certified yet too. So we want to look at, if we were to go into the US, we have to look at whether we should do certification or if we need to start looking at the language that we use to talk about our products. So basically, like in the end, as a brand, especially emerging brands, we want to look at, is this worth it to go for sustainable packaging? The market, I do believe, is trending towards sustainability, like the rise of organic foods and non-GMO foods. Consumers are increasingly recognizing that packaging also plays a big role in how our food systems affect the environment. So I can definitely see that as this becomes more pressing concern globally, people are going to be asking or purchasing things that are sustainable in terms of the packaging and not just the food that's inside of it. 70% of consumers believe that brands need to do more to protect the environment, and a lot of change in terms of making the planet better does need to come from companies rather than individuals. And so having sustainable packaging can be a value proposition for your product. You know, especially if you are an earlier adopter, you have a differentiation from your competitors who may not have sustainable packaging. You would be able to target, you know, consumers who care about this type of concern. And also, like, it's good for the planet. So, but not all of them are equal. You kind of really have to look at what materials are out there to make sure that the choices you make are actually what they say they are. Like in the case of oxo-degradable, you know, we all thought that it was, and then it turned out to be something else. So you do have to kind of keep abreast of this information. There are some cons, so there are fewer suppliers that are doing it. I did put a list of companies that I've talked and looked at packaging with, because I know that it can be very, very hard to source compostable packaging. So these are companies that are providing compostable options. There are high minimums because oftentimes they don't have very many customers who are doing it. So if they need to bring in the materials, they need to bring in a lot to make it worth it. The cost is, hopefully, as more and more people adopt it, this will start to go down. And they do have long lead times because manufacturers don't keep the raw material in stock because of the shorter shelf life when it's raw. It's a compostable material, so they don't want it for 10 years for something that can compose. So it's not the same as conventional packaging. So that's all I want to talk about today. Those are things I think should be considered if you're looking for sustainable packaging. Although the barriers are high, I really believe that's an important step to take as an emerging food brand to drive change in our industry. And I hope that more and more companies like yours will consider adopting more sustainable packaging options for your products. So yeah, please feel free. There's my contact information if you want to bounce some ideas off or just kind of, you know, wanted some ideas on where to move forward. I'm happy to chat about it. Thanks, everyone.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Angela. As always, that was amazing. And thank you for sharing your list of suppliers that you've talked to. And Nicole Porterfield asked a question to you. What company do you get your bags from? And I think it's Root Tree, right?
That's right. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much, Angela. We're going to switch it to Aditan. I'm going to get her to start her video and I'll get her to unmute. There she is. There we go.
Hi all. Hello.
Okay, take it away. Thanks for joining us.
Okay, yeah, I'm happy to be here. So I'm just gonna share my screen real quick, and I'm just gonna share a little anecdote how I develop my brand and how I get to my product and all. Lots of anecdotes. You'll like it. So let's just go ahead. Okay. Can you see my screen right now?
I can't.
It seems like it's loading. Just give it 1 minute.
For sure.
I seems to freeze, so just
Yeah, I think you're a bit frozen here, but I think we just give it a second.
oh, hello. Am I back on again?
Yeah, you're here. I'm just
Okay,
gonna.
let's try it one more time. Sorry about that. There you go.
There we go. Perfect.
How is it this time?
Yeah, that's great. Thanks. Good.
All right. Yeah, so my name is Aditan. I am the owner of Beichu Kimchi. You could contact me through Instagram, beichu.kimchi, or send me an email, aditan@beichukimchi.ca if you like the presentation, or if you just want to connect. I will be more than happy to have some of you on my contact. Okay, so just to start my presentation, so I'm talking about branding and packaging today. That's just gonna go ahead and right. So because like branding is such a big topic, and Shinuka gave a really great introduction that like there's different goals for branding. Like, sometimes like branding surpass the live show of your product. Sometimes people already use your product or eat it all, and then they look at the branding, they still want to connect with you because the topic is so big. I'm just gonna focus on the branding of your product at a store, like on a shelf, essentially. And we want to set a goal because once we set a goal, then we can set action plan. So the goal of the package in the store is that it to get people to grab your product. So imagine this as a resume. A resume doesn't land you a job. A resume lands you a job interview. And this is exactly what your packaging in the store would do. It gets the people to pick your product, and then they can take the product home, and then they can try it, and then they could love your product. So you really have to put yourself out there because, as you know, in the store and the shelf, there are lots of competitors out there. So how do you make sure that your product stand against other competitor and is eye-grabbing enough that people would buy it? So it's almost a little narrow if you say that, well, packaging is just, a thing that, a vessel to contain your product. Well, have a look at this. This is a Becca highlighter, I think, or it's a shimmer. Look at how small the packaging is, or the small the bottle is compared to this whole big package. Why do you think they put that cardboard there when the product itself is this small? And it's not really a trick question. Essentially, they just want to occupy as much shelf space as possible to make their product visible, to make the product looks attractive. And then you might want to ask yourself, well, so I just have to make my product looks good then, right? And that's all, that just solve all the problem. Actually, not really, because if you look at the next picture of all these bottles on the shelf, to be honest, like all of these bottles are attractive, but to different people. So how do you know that your bottle would attract the right people? Just imagine like these bottles speaking a different language. Like they might just, you walk by the aisle and they said, hello, bonjour, hola. If you're a Spanish speaker, you look at it, you would just turn around the bottle that call you hola. So, because it speak directly to you, it speak your language. So how do you make sure that your product speak your language and not the other language that your customer doesn't care? We're going to be looking at two different things here. So first we have to find a brand position. A brand position is like a language I was talking about. Find where you want to be, how you want to represent, and to whom. So I just want to like run you through my product iterations first and how it evolved to be the product that I have right now. So this the white one here, it's my first product design because I started as a farmer's market vendor. I don't really care how it looks. I just patch together using Photoshop and Microsoft Word really, because half the people at the market doesn't even have branding to begin with. So there was already a step up. And then like, most people when they come with their first product iteration, they don't really care much about the branding because first you want to make sure that people buy your product first before you invest in branding or designing or packaging. And that's exactly what I did. And then once you start getting some traction, then you start paying designer to do your branding, or you print on something nice or put in a nice package. And that's exactly what I did. After I know that people are buying my kimchi at the farmers market, I put some money into the developing the branding. Oh, I just see some chat question too. Sorry. Yes, so develop the branding. But then the only thing I thought about when I was developing it is, do I like this? That's all. I did not think about my competitors. I did not think about my client. I just think about myself, which is the biggest mistake that you could do when you do branding. So what happened is that year I decided maybe I want to sell my product across Canada. So I decided to go the biggest food trade show in Canada. I think it's called like CHFA, which is kind of like a natural health trade show in Vancouver. And I was so amazed by all the brands out there, hundreds and hundreds of them. They're just so beautiful. But in the back of my mind, I was like crying. I'm like, if my product were to be right beside any of these products in this show, I would never make a single dollars because it's not eye-catching. Nobody's care about this cute farmy looking kimchi that I have. That's when I know that I had to stop thinking about myself and really think about who my competitors are and who my customer are, which makes me go to the next point. If I can move the slide. Aha. So now that you know that, you shouldn't think about much about yourself. You should focus on maybe your competitors or maybe your customer. How do you make sure that your products stand out from your competitors? So to know if your product would stand out or to know your competitors to begin with, first you have to list out who your competitors are. This one is the competitor analysis. Is a little overkill. I kind of did this for my other presentation, but honestly, what you have to do is just list out all your competitors, just the name. You don't even need the strength and weakness and stuff. This is kind of like an in-depth analysis. You don't have to worry about it, just to do like a quick brand development. So just list it out like, okay, I'm selling kombucha. I have this and this and this who share the same shelf space as me. They could be my potential competitor and they might be on the same shelf as me. So definitely they would be on my list. And after you list it out, you have to pick what is your strength to compete with these competitors. Find the two things, just the two things that you think that this is something that you have leverage over your competitor. If it's a little hard to think, try to put in this term. Is your product a better product? Does it offer a different value? For example, is your product gluten-free if your competitor is not? Is your product, let's say, organic and your competitor is not? Or what about price? Are you selling cheaper than your competitor or are you more expensive? Then it might not really be your leverage. What about the place? Are you offering different kind of place to sell? Are you selling it online too or in the store? So all of these could be a leverage that you can pick. And now that you pick two things that you want to leverage on, this is the fun part. You plot a graph and you pick two value. So here I have an X and Y graph. So my product, I picked that I have authentic recipe and I have super fun branding because that's how I see my competitor. I want people who fun and love food to eat my product. And where you want to be is you want to be in this top right corner. This is the perfect spot you be. It means that you're like dominating this graph essentially. And the last spot you want to be is the opposite of that, which is the bottom left-hand corner. It means like you're not even part of this graph. We don't even care about you. So after you did that, you start plotting all your competitors in this graph and see which position they're in according to your value. So as you can see, I put all my competitors out there and I kind of put myself like, hey, I'm still at the corner of the graph where I want it to be, which is awesome. And luckily, my biggest competitor is actually this Wild Brine Kimchi brand, which is a brand from US. They happen to be on the opposite end of my graph too. So win-win, right? After you got this graph and when you put the picture of your competitor in, you actually see their pattern and their branding too. For example, you look at this Rooster Kimchi. Okay, red and white, Jonga Kimchi, red and white and red, red and white and red. All the same kind of pattern. And then you see this one, hey, it's yellow, it looks different and it stands out. So to do this virtually, you can really see how your brand would stand out. If you don't want to go into making this graph, you can actually like take your product in the store and like kind of place it on the shelf and see like, okay, does it look good on the shelf or not? Would people see it if it's on the shelf? So that's another way to do it. I just happen to like file all my competitors' picture on Google, so I'm able to plot it easily. So just something to think about. Okay, so and then move to the, sorry. Right, so now let's see like, what if you're like making something groundbreaking? Nobody ever done it before. Who would you consider as a competitor? What if you are the only one in your category? The thing is, as long as you share a show of someone, they could be your competitor. For example, like I am, let's say I am the first one who made kombucha in this town. Nobody else had made it before. And so I'm the only kombucha on the shelf. Does it mean I have no competitor? Absolutely not. People, when they shop, they think of something called a substitute good. Okay, if I don't get kombucha, is there something else I could get? Those could be your competitor too. So you have to consider what other products right beside you that also selling, sharing the same space as you. They could be your competitor. The only time that I could think that people don't really have competitors if you have your own store, you know, and even then your product might be competing among themselves, or maybe like you take the whole shelf space. That could also be if you wouldn't really care much about your competitors. But most of the time you will care about your competitor and you want to make sure that your product stand out and you speak the same language as your customer. Oh, see, second. Right, so now you already got the brand positioning. Now it comes to the package design. You could probably start to piece it together already that the package design is actually just like a part of brand positioning. Once you get your brand position, once you know what your competitors are doing, now you can do your own stuff to fit in there. So you see that the package design actually comes after, versus like most people when they start a business, they would do package design first and then they would think about where they're positioned, but it should be the other way around, right? The other thing that I didn't really mention is your target customer. You have to know who your customer are and what they like and what is something that they strive for. Because I only have 15 minutes to speak, I can't really go too much into the target audience. I think that's something you could do on your own, along with the competitor analysis. And when you put it together, boom, you would have the perfect product on the shelf. Great. Okay. So after I did my target audience and I did my competitor analysis, I come up with these characteristics from my brand. I imagine my customer to be someone who is fun, who enjoy food, someone who do yoga in the morning and party on the weekend, and then they redo it again because they love their life, they love their health, they want the best of both worlds. So I want the font to be fun and modern, and I want the color to be vibrant. And plus, I'm selling Asian food. I want like bright, bold, like yellow, red, green. I don't know. It just like scream my culture for me. And the other thing is, since I'm selling ethnic food and people haven't tried it yet, you want to build a bridge that people trust you. So by having your packaging transparent, people can see through it, it building that kind of trust, because it's kind of hard to convince us to get someone to buy something new if they don't even see what the product is inside. Like, I mean, like if you're selling potato chips, people know what potato chips is. But when you're selling kimchi or something that you try to introduce to a market, you might want people to show the people what it is inside so that they feel a bit better committing to your product and your brand. So that's the reason that I pick the glass jar. And I mean, like the other two presenters kind of touch on this topic a little bit of like what kind of packaging you should pick. For me, it really depends on who your target audience is. Like when I do my audience research, it looks like they care about environment, and I get kind of like a confirmation on that because some of my clients contact me and ask me like, hey, how do I use this jar after that? They actually want to reuse the jar. So I want to use the glass jar, and my other competitors also use a plastic jar too, which is kind of like give my product a more of a premium look than the competitors, giving me more leverage over them. But if your product is for someone who's like always on the go, like, you know, I just want to grab this drink and go real quick. Maybe you don't want to do glass bottle because that's heavy. It doesn't fit in the backpack. So all these different things you want to consider, even with plastic bottle as well too. It really depends on who are they targeting. Do you want to save on cost? What are the things that your customer care about? And that's conclude my presentation. I hope I didn't speak too fast, but feel free to ask me anything.
That is so great. Thank you so much, Aditan. That was like, I found that to be really informative and funny. And some of your analogies there were great. Like the grocery store analogies were great. And for sure, I would definitely implore people who are trying to do a packaging audit to literally go to the grocery store and look and do that live comparison to see, you know, how it actually stands out on the shelf. So let's get the Q&A started. I have some questions. I'm going to get Maurice and Angela to unmute themselves here and turn on their videos. Okay, so panelists, feel free to throw in any of your questions here. Mo, I have a question maybe that you could just start us off with, to kick us off. I have maybe 5 questions that came through the registration about the glass versus plastic debate. And Aditan was kind of elaborating on that when her first point was glass is more appealing in the sense it's denotes a luxury product or a luxe product. What other things can we discuss on when I should choose plastic packaging versus glass? And Mo, go ahead and kick us off.
Sure, yeah. So I'd say glass or even rigid plastic containers, for instance. We have a lot of customers, for instance, protein powder customers that are starting to convert to flexible packaging because of the logistics behind it. So you can imagine shipping if you need to, produce 10,000 units a month. You may have to fill your warehouse with your plastic containers in order to be ready for filling. Whereas if you consider it in a flexible package, it may be just a few small boxes on your shelf. You also consider the cost of shipping those. A lot of times you're shipping air and you're paying pretty high rates because oftentimes those items are cube rated versus the actual weight. So from that side of things, there's a lot of benefit to using a flexible package. As far as design, you're right, and Adikan mentioned that a glass does have a kind of a high-end feel or look. It's a little more tactile, I guess, but you can do some pretty neat things with design as well on flexible packaging. And as I mentioned, with haptic, if you wanted to, do some neat stuff. I had a customer making beef jerky. Actually, their design was historically always a kind of a burlap-looking bag. When we started doing the haptic print, they just added that texture to now feel like burlap as opposed to just looking like a plastic bag that looked like burlap, right? So those are the kind of things I think you want to consider.
Interesting. I'm going to get Angela and Aditan to put their answers in. But I'm just going to let all the attendees know that I'm going to promote you to so that you can talk and share your screen if you want. Okay, so if there's just a little bit of a lag, you'll come back right away. But I'm going to pass the mic to Angela if you want to chime in anything you know about glass versus plastic.
I think Maurice put it pretty clear. Like I said, it's very hard to choose one or the other because it really depends on the product that you have and also your target market, like Aditan mentioned. So for us, we chose glass jars for our honey because since we're shipping anyway, honey is very heavy to ship anyway, and we wanted something that would be endlessly recyclable. That's why we chose glass jars. In terms of again for our so that's pretty much what I had to do, but that fit really well with our product and also our brand and our demographic, but that might be different for other people who have a different set of parameters they're working with.
Mm-hmm. Thanks. Aditan, do you want to add anything?
No, I think the you guys kind of covered it already. Definitely, like plastic is like cheaper to ship if you're kind of focusing more on like the online market. But yeah, definitely if you mainly want to be like in store, I would vouch for glass because like lots of people really looking to that whole like reusable thing too. Like they want to reuse the glass and it justify for them to like paying more, and this is some kind of value you can add to your product too. You can actually sell it more because it perceived as value that you're selling in a glass jar. So it really depends on like if you position your product in like a premium product, or is it you're competing it on price, so it really depends. It's hard to say which one is better than the other.
Mhm. Thank you for those answers. Another question we have here is, how do you, I mean, this is kind of to Aditan's target market question, which we didn't really discuss. But the question is, how do you know when your customer wants the change to compostable packaging or recyclable packaging, or how do you gauge that versus price and quality? How important is it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's come from like the actual dialogue that you have with your customer. If you're not selling at the farmer's market, when you do like product demos or the feedback you get from customer, like try to like play it off. You're just kind of like chit chatting with them, but really you're just asking them stuff like, oh, what you doing during the weekend? Like, oh, like, just kind of like just a small talk, but really you're doing like market research inside, like, okay, what do my customer do on my weekend? What do they eat and where do they sleep? Like, you have like all that going in your head. But really you try to like know who they are and what kind of thing that important to them. And you can kind of like give them a little tip on your product too, to see if how would they respond. Like sometimes I would just tell my customer like, hey, by the way, you know what? If you think the lid smells like kimchi, just let it air for a couple of days and it would stop smelling like kimchi. And they will be like, oh, good to know. Cause last time I did that, it smells like kimchi everywhere. Like, so then you would know that, oh, they actually try to use the jar. So this kind of like subtle dialogues is really going to get your consumer to tell you more about who they are. And I think it's very valuable. You can get this kind of information too. You can hire a firm to do it for you, but it costs a lot of money. Like I'm talking about thousands and thousands of dollars. So, I mean, the cheapest way to do is you talk to the customer yourself.
Angela, would you like to add anything?
I guess like for us, we started out with sustainable packaging, so we didn't really give the customer an option to decide whether or not to, from us at least. So for us, it's about like putting it out there, like doing the research first to see like, are people interested in sustainable packaging? For us, because it was such a core value of our brand, we knew that we wanted to move forward with it. Even if the customer was not quite there yet, because we really believe that eventually this is what's going to happen with the market. And then just looking at marketing as a value proposition and seeing how people respond to that, like telling people, hey, this is a product that is sustainable. Hey, this is, you can put it in your home compost, things like that, and just seeing how people react to that. Some people in our, like, especially in our target demographic, they care a lot about that stuff, and like Aditan said, like talk to them about these people. What do they like to do? Like, are they gardening? Are they like, do they care about these things? And just finding out personally. And we also find that when we speak with buyers, grocery buyers, if you are presenting this as a value proposition, they're also very receptive to it as well, because it is different. It is differentiates your product compared to all of the other products that may be looking at more excessive packaging.
Yeah, I just want to add one more thing too, and you can look into your competitors too. Like, what are your competitors doing? Like, are they using, because you want to be sort of different from them, like if they're using clear glass, do you want to use tinted glass? Like, you try to find something that make you stand out on the shelf. Like, if all of them are glass and then you offer plastic but cheaper, maybe you will stand out too. So it really depends on like how you want to position yourself, like on the shelf, assuming that you're selling in a store.
Definitely. Thanks for that. Maurice, would you like to add anything?
Yeah, knowing your customer is important. And, a lot of times I'm dealing with some of the national brand meat processors who, a lot of questions from them are not necessarily from them, but it's from their customers. So sustainability is a good point there, right? A lot of times if one of the meat processors I'm working with is inquiring about a sustainable option, it's not that it's coming from them so much, it's coming from their customer, right? So sometimes understanding the requirements and the driving force behind their inquiry, it's really helpful to direct them, right?
Definitely. Yeah, like, and we have so many questions coming in about packaging. Like a lot of these questions are about how do I choose, blah, blah, blah. But what we're hearing from the panelists is that it is about your target market, and really comes back down to what are the objectives of the organization, all of those things, and that can drive your packaging decision making. And something else we haven't really touched on is make sure you set a budget. Like Mo was saying at the beginning, like what do you have going on here? Like, what kind of equipment do you have? What are your sales like? Like those are also a part of the packaging decision-making framework as well. So it's not just about like, where can I get the cheapest cardboard boxes or where can I get the cheapest glass jars? It's one component of the larger operational strategic strategy for you. And it's, if you want to sell in a glass jar at the farmer's market, like that's great. Yes, you can do that. We're having this discussion with the assumption that you want to be, in multiple markets across multiple borders, getting in as much profit as you can. So it comes down to what your goals are as a company.
Yes, absolutely. I want to add to that too, that about glass manufacturer in Canada. As far as I know, and through my research and all of that, I don't think we have any glass manufacturer in Canada. So your choice is very limited to only a certain style and model, and even the price itself, because most of them would either be made somewhere, either in the US or China, and then get imported to Canada. So you're very restricted. So to have your product stand out by the shape and size alone, it's very difficult. Like if you can go look at the grocery store, most of them you would see the same kind of glass jar with different labels. So that's also a limitation, versus like if you're doing like a pouch bag or other kind of packaging that manufactured in Canada, you would have more selection and you could actually like shape it and mold it better than the glass that we import. So that's one more thing too.
That makes sense. So we are, and thanks for that, out of 10. So we're at 12:41. I'm just going through this list, and a lot of these questions are really about like cost. And I find that interesting because just as much as you would invest in the, like I said at the beginning, the formulation of your product or the product testing, like those things are expensive, your food safety plan, packaging should be given equal weight and equal thought. So for the panelists, could you speak perhaps to conclude, you can give us a piece of advice on when it comes to packaging decision making, thinking of it as an investment into the business versus just a monthly expense, going to Staples, getting those cardboard boxes. So yeah, let's conclude, and I'll get Mo if you want to talk about how packaging is an investment. Go ahead.
Yeah, sure. So I guess I noticed one of the chat questions was asking about digital printing, and that's a good segue into considering the cost up front. So Winpack doesn't digital print ourselves, but we have a partner that will work with the digital print. Now, the difference with digital print versus what we do with flexographic print is you don't require the plates, those upfront plate costs for your design. And those plates can be somewhat cost prohibitive, especially if you have a certain budget. Again, as I think I mentioned earlier in my presentation, that it doesn't have a big impact on the price of a pouch, for instance, whether you're a 4-color or a 10-color design, but that upfront plate cost, it can be a little more impactful, right? So digital is an option that I have existing customers using. So for instance, I have a couple of national brands I work with that use me for their larger volume items, but they use the digital printing for a new item, for instance, that they don't know if it's going to last too long, right? So they don't want to make an investment in these artwork and plate costs unless they're certain it's going to be sustainable, right? So that's an option. Now I know with digital printing, from my experience, they cost a little bit more for the pouch, but when you're saving thousands of dollars of artwork that you may not have to put out or may not want to put out, that's a decision you have to make and considering your budget, right? So yeah, that's the kind of consideration I definitely want to consider. Budget is a big part of a project for sure.
Angela, go ahead. last pieces of advice?
I don't know how good of advice I can provide, but as I have mentioned, like, we use compostable packaging. It is not the cheapest option out there, but it is a very important part of our brand identity and our authenticity to show that we really believe in sustainability. So for us, it's an investment in terms of our what we can provide to customers when they purchase our products. And I think, especially if we are, generally we are not Coca-Cola's and we're not, for me, Werther's, right? So we have a different value proposition that we are bringing. And so, all of us are looking for like super high quality ingredients, super high quality methods of making your food. So as Shanika said, like, the packaging should respect and honor that as well. And it can be a big component in showing your customers why your product is, maybe a little more expensive than the no-name brand, because you do have care in all different elements of your product rather than just what's inside.
That's great. Thank you, Angela. Go ahead.
Oh, then my turn now. Yeah, so for me, packaging is something that opens your doors to potential and lifelong customer. I think whatever you show at the store could be the first step of a very loyal customer, like just that first initial impact that it has. So you should like consider all different kind of angles when you come to choosing a packaging or a design. But the trick is it doesn't have to be perfect for the first time. You can keep going through iteration and iteration until you find the best one, and then you stick with it. And just like going back to the printing plate and the digital printing, this is so important too. When you're at early stage company, you don't want to invest too much in something that it's a sunk cost for you. Let's say like a graphic art that's already in a plate that you have to print thousands and thousands of label, because you know what, in 3 months, maybe you want to change it again because you find that your customer respond to different packaging and different design. So at early stage, try to save costs and invest, iterate your product a lot until you find that perfect spot and find your position. And one last thing about packaging and production is like, before you're picking any kind of package, you should really consider how it's being packaged with your product too. Because if you have like really tight bottle and you can't really use machine to like fill your product, it's gonna take you days to fill it. I know I am one of them, and I should have thought of it when I first started it. Like, my product, it's all manual jarring. Wish I would have thought of it before I started it. Right? So maybe you want to consider that too, because it also about what is the most effective way for your production. That's it.
That was great. That was so great. We're at 12:50-ish. So thank you everyone for showing your videos. And I just wanted the speakers to see who they have been talking to. A wonderful group of entrepreneurs, women in the Canadian prairies here. So I want to just open up the floor. If anyone has any last questions, you all should be able to unmute yourselves. Anyone has any questions that I didn't answer? Anyone? No?
I have one.
Go ahead.
For those of us who had to go about doing business in the middle of attending this meeting, is it going to be possible to be able to watch an entire replay of the whole thing?
Yeah, for sure. I'm recording it, so I'll definitely send it out.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no problem. Anyone else? All right. Okay, ladies and Maurice, thank you so much for joining us today. This was our Awesome Leaders Mentor Circle session on packaging, a very expansive topic. As I mentioned, next month we won't have Awesome Leaders as typical. We'll do our conference, which will be about, the theme will be on marketing. We have some speakers lined up already, so quite excited about that. And I'll keep in touch with you regarding the details for that. I'd like to thank the speakers one more time. Aditan, Angela, and Mo, thank you so much for joining us. You have no idea how many questions we get about packaging. And like I said at the beginning, it's just as important as our formulations and our actual product. So thank you so much for sharing your insights. And with that, I will let everyone go. Have a great afternoon, and I'll see you soon. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks,
Thank you
Mo.
all.
Thanks, Aitan. Thanks, Angela. Goodbye, everyone.